Okay, so good morning, Abigail. Again, we have been chatting a little bit before, but Abigail Austin, we're going to be having a chat around your second book that has just come out. And I know that probably with the seasons and thinking more, geocentric rather than human-centric, you have a line in the book that I heard is "Spring has sprung," and we're in the spring, and we're springing around, but you've sprung up another and a new book. But maybe if you just, and I'm sure you get used to this, but if you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself to people who have never come across you or your organization before, where you're from, and also a little bit about Familias Verdes, which we've come across, or Green Families. I'm sure you have it in both
Yeah.
languages. But good morning, and thanks a million for joining us for this chat.
Oh, well, thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity. Um, yeah, okay, about me. Well, my name is Abigail, and I'm an Australian mother and author living in Spain. I've been living here for 10 years. And I have a background in storytelling through, I studied theatre, and when I was in Australia, I did a lot of theatre. And I also studied creative writing, television writing, and film writing. And yeah, like 10 years ago, I did the Camino de Santiago. I don't know if you know that walk through Spain.
Yeah.
It's a month-long walk through Spain. And in the last 3 days, I met my husband. That's how I ended up moving to Spain. So it really kind of changed my whole life, as you can imagine, moving to a completely different country with a different language. And yes, I love living here. It's a wonderful place, and it's very inspiring for people that like to write and be creative. It's fantastic. But then I became a mother, and during the process of becoming a mother, well, I guess before that, I was very concerned about the environment, but definitely having a baby made me take this very, very seriously and think about my skills and interests and maybe how I can use those to help help in this environmental movement in some way. Um, and so it's interesting that you mentioned Familias Verdes, which was this community that I started a few years ago, maybe like just after the pandemic or during the pandemic. And it was fantastic because during the pandemic, we were all very much separated. And I had this desire, and I think many other people had this desire to kind of reconnect. And I also had this idea to I was like, I have to do something. I have to do something about the environment. It's so important. And I kind of, for a moment there, I thought, forget about my skills. I have to do like something in business. I have to do something practical. Forget about the creative stuff. And so I was like, okay, maybe I could create this business with children's secondhand clothing and use profits to reforest. So I kind of went on this track of doing that. And it didn't work out for me. It didn't work out. And I think partly it didn't work out for many, many different reasons. Lots of businesses don't work. But I just went, that's not really what I think I should be doing. I think I should be really doing the things that bring me to life, that are sustainable for me. And I think we should all be doing that. Maybe if I were a different person, I would love to be a lawyer and be an environmental lawyer, but that's just not my skill set. So I just want, okay, Abby, you have to use what you know how to do and you love to do. And so that's when I started to move into, I wrote my first book, which was Birth at the End of the Earth, My Journey from Eco-Anxiety to Eco-Action. And it really is just a memoir of my experience of having a child, feeling like crippling ecological anxiety. It was very, very intense, and thinking, okay, how do I get out of that? And just the steps that I took to get out of that. And it finishes with the death of my mother. So it was a very transformative period for me, though, and it was all during COVID, the birth of my son, the fires in Australia, being locked out of my home country for 2 years, and then kind of just missing seeing my mother before she passed away because of that. So it was a very intense time, and I thought was worth documenting my experience and using my skills as a storyteller, because I think it was a very transformative time for many people, and I thought this could actually be useful for other people just to hear someone telling their story. After telling my story, I thought, hey, that's just one story. There's many stories out there, and I think there is power in hearing stories. So I started my podcast, The Eco Enthusiast. So I kind of moved away from the local Familias Verdes idea and kind of moved out to a broader community online. but speaking with people all over the world, how human beings are changing during this time, because I think it is a very transformative time, and there are beautiful people out there doing these fantastic things, and they're hard things. So I love hearing these hard journeys of people becoming who they are. It's a wonderful thing. The climate crisis and the ecological crisis has so many horrible elements to it, but I think there's also a lot of beauty to be found. So that's what I'm trying to show in my podcast and remind all of us that we're in this together. And also, after doing that book about birth at the end of the earth, it's a bit of a hard sell. It's a bit of a hard sell for people to sit down and read a story about climate catastrophe. People have responded like the way I hoped, going, oh, that's just how I felt. And that's wonderful. But I thought, okay, what's other ways we can communicate? And that's how I moved into maybe children's stories is another way we can communicate our ecological issues to people. And I did a course called Think Like a Tree, which is this fantastic course about learning from nature, how you can learn resilience from nature. And I think that's where I came up with this idea for this book, The Girl Who Became a Tree. And yeah, I mean, that's how I came about writing this one.
I love it. And thank you for just, painting the picture and putting things in context and really challenging and hard context. What I love and what I'm hearing from you sharing here, and the resonance is quite strong. From anxiety, which was completely normal. The rational thing for the last number of years is to have that sense of stress in the body, stress in the mind, stress in the environment that we're around, which can lead to anxiety and all the other things, but to action. And I think and you've mentioned, sometimes it can be quite heavy, but action doesn't always have to be quite heavy. It can be, but it can lift a little bit of that. So finding your voice, there's something beautiful in your dedication to this book that we're going to be talking about this morning, the kids' book, to your father as well. And I wasn't aware of your mother, so I'm sorry of your mother's passing, but I imagine it comes together in the action. I'm going to, not let my branches be clipped or cut, and actually grow and using the skills, using the lived experience, using everything that you've had in your journey to one sort of point of, okay, this is what I want to share here as well. So I love the fact that you're sharing in a very short space of time there, so much in that. And we came in contact for the very first time through my partner, Elena, and it was that organization that you had set up, Familia Verde. And there was also something different in the way you were approaching that from when we got a chance to meet, and then some of the products that we were able to take on board and connect with. But the fact that you're just giving it a go during this turmoil that the world is, upside down, so much restrictions, so much, forced pauses, and then sometimes the natural pauses that came out of that as well. But I love the fact that you were able to discern what is the best thing right now, in spite and despite what might be going on. How can I still flourish? And from listening to the audio version of your book, and I'd love if you were able to share at some point a piece or even the book, if you're able to share it this morning. And I know that's on YouTube, and if possible, we'll put a link to that and a link to where people can buy and get your book. Because I said before, you're not going to come on a conversation and I'm going to start off by saying I really hated the book, but there's a huge but. I mean, I've just got a chance to connect with it for the first time, and then we're going to show it to our children. I think kids are the best critics for sure. They'll either turn off or ask a question in the middle that's not related, but I don't feel that's going to be the case here. And there's so much straight away. My own sort of quick reflections is for parents. What you were talking about there, about that, oh my goodness, I'm becoming a parent and look at the world around us. For me, that was a huge source of anxiety 7 years ago. And I decided to do my own sort of podcast at the time, which was the Dublin Dad's Diary for his daughter, but mainly around one Irish song actually that came to me is How Can I Protect You in This Crazy World? The musician and the singer has passed on since then, but it's a very famous Irish song. But it was playing out one day, and I was becoming a dad, and we were becoming parents for the first time, and it was just like, holy shit, what are we going to do? What do we need to do and what, what's within our agency, what's within our capacity to, to share, to learn, and to put it out to other people. So I think it's being extremely brave what you're doing, and a lot of people can learn from that. And lastly, before I've actually got a question or two, yeah, when you're talking about um, the why, the who is it for, the people within the book. So I think it's definitely children, obviously, and the tree terminology and the nature-based terminology is really easy to get on board, but it's also for parents. So this morning, the last 24 hours, since actually taking in your piece of poetry and prose and creativity and ecology all together in one, I found myself this morning, even bringing our kids to school, there were a couple of lines that were going into my mind. For me, that's a sort of testimony of where and the power of a book and the power of imagery. But I was saying to myself, stop trying to cut the branches of particularly one of our daughters this morning that was challenging in a good way, because kids need to challenge. But rather than saying stop doing that, or don't do this, I was saying, let the branches, let them grow a little bit more, and see what's next. And the power of a line or two of one book, for me, that's a sense of, if you can live it, if you can listen to it and and remember some of the key points, but try and act it out, try and embody it somehow. And so, yeah, I love the fact that it is, for me at least, geocentric into human-centric, rather than the other way around. And almost like in an indigenous wisdom, that we often put ourselves first in Western world, and that can lead to so many challenges. But if we go to nature first, if we look at the terminology, and the tree, such a strong, such a powerful way of exploring that. So much was coming to me when I was listening and connecting with the words in the book, and hopefully we can get a chance for other people to hear them too. But if I can start off actually with the last dedication, and if you don't mind sharing, because you said, from my father, who taught me to grow, my own way. And I was almost ready to turn off, Abigail. I just, the book had finished, and then there was the last piece. But actually, there was something really powerful in that, as a father, as a parent, to allow that flourishing to happen rather than curtailing it. So do you want to speak to that at all, if you're comfortable?
Yeah,
And
for sure.
it was a beautiful dedication.
Yeah, like I just my dad is my biggest inspiration. He's my best friend, and I speak to him every day, even though we live on the other side of the world. And he was always like that. He always did whatever he felt like doing, as long as it obviously didn't hurt anyone else. But he was always very expressive of who he was. He didn't care what people said or thought about himself. So he was a great example. I remember one time, like, this is an example, when he was working next to my high school, and he was like, he's very creative, wears whatever the hell he wants. And he was like, oh, he saw one of my mother's earrings, and he said, oh, I think I might wear that tomorrow. And I said to him, Dad, I said, please, do you understand, like, what you're going to do to me if you wear that ear? Like, please, I'm begging you, do not wear that earring. The other kids at school will see you. And he was just looked at me, and he was like, really disappointed. He was like, oh, I won't wear it. But I thought I raised you like differently to that. I thought you would just let people be who they are. And I felt so bad. I felt so bad. And he said, because there are people, he goes, I have friends in this town who, it was a very small Australian town, very old school. And he goes, I have friends in this town who are gay and who wear their certain clothes, and they do feel very uncomfortable. And I wouldn't want you to be one of the people that make them feel like they can't be who they are. And so, yeah, well, that was a great lesson. But even before that, when I was at, I remember this so clearly, and it's a tricky one. Okay, it's a very difficult one. But I was the teacher, like my father went for a meeting. The teacher was talking about my behavior at school when I was like 5 or 6, and it was a lovely teacher. But he said, "Oh, Abby has this problem where she'll like." When I turn around, she'll get up and try and make everyone laugh, and she'll like try and, just be silly. And my dad just looked at the teacher like and said, but like, that's who she is. Like, let her, like, that's partly, obviously that's part of who she is. And he told me this story, and he was a bit like, in horror that the school might take this away from me, this confidence to get up in front of people and just express myself and try and make them laugh. So I remember that, and he's always been a bit like that, very concerned that I get to be who I am. And I think it's important, and all my family are teachers, so of course we understand that you can't behave badly at school. It's not about that. It's just being a little bit aware of that, being conscious of that, of everyone is different. We all know that the school classes are so big these days that it's really hard for anyone to really be themselves. So I think all those types of things, those are the two stories I remember that stuck in my brain and made me think I have been raised by someone who was aware that there is something about the systems that we have that can cut your branches, and just was a bit sensitive to, I just want to make sure that that doesn't happen, that you get the opportunity to grow. So I think that's why
Mhm.
I ended up dedicating it to my father.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing those anecdotes, because they're really powerful, and it makes sense as well when you hear the person behind the dedication as well, and that connection. And so you talk there about the various different hats that we have, and I love that hat of being a daughter, um, being an integral part of this piece of writing and creation. And the other hats that you have, you mentioned becoming a mother for the first time, an educator, a creative individual as well. And so within this book, you both wrote it and you illustrated it. And I remember, I think Elena was sharing, maybe she shared an audio between the two of you, but that you wrote it quite quickly, it seems, but then all of the other stuff comes in as well that, from my understanding, it's not an easy process, but could you talk a little bit about, the fact that you both wrote it and illustrated it, and how that was to integrate both of those roles?
Well, I teach English here for little kids, and I had noticed how whenever the story was rhyming, even if they didn't understand what was happening, they were with it 100%. They just loved the music of being told a story. And I was just thought, wow, this is really powerful, because they have no idea what I'm saying. I know their level of English, but they just like being swept up in this music. And so I thought, okay, I would love to try and do that with the story. I think it would be so cool to be able to kind of hypnotize people in a way, and have them come along on this journey with you. So I thought that was in my brain, that I wanted to write something like that. And I had been doing this Think Like a Tree course, and just imagining myself as a tree a lot, to be honest. Like when I have a difficult day, it would help calm me down. When I would be like, oh, this idea didn't work. Or as you said, I've been trying all these different ideas into how I'm going to be part of this ecological movement. And sometimes you fail, and we're not in a culture that respects failure. Like we're in a culture that sweeps that under the rug or makes you feel terrible for failing. So she said something like, a tree doesn't do that. Like if a tree gets to a block, it would just go the other way. It just looks for the water. It just goes with the flow. So I was thinking like, yeah, I need to be more like a tree. And so I think that's why I went, oh, mate, wouldn't it be interesting if this girl wanted to be a tree? Um, and it really just came out of me. I don't know why it came out in maybe a day or two, the whole poem just in my head. And I wrote it on Facebook, and it seemed to connect with people. And many people said, this needs to be a children's book. I can see the pictures, I can see it. And I have done a bit of drawing, but no illustrations really. So I was looking for an illustrator, and it's very difficult because you have to pay obviously a lot of money. It takes time. Now I know why they charge a lot, because it takes a lot of skill and
Yeah.
effort and time. And so I was like, what am I going to do? And my husband bought me the digital iPad, and he said, I think you should do the drawings. And so I had to learn my style. I had to learn what worked. And I really wanted the story. It was interesting trying to make the pictures, to be honest, because if you made the pictures another way, the story could come across quite dark in some ways, because she's changing out of a human form. So
Sure.
I thought, okay, I don't want this to be scary. This is a joyful, fun, imaginative, it's just meant to be fun. It's not meant to be, oh, she's really it's not meant to be like Hans Christian Andersen horror, children's horror, which it could be. So I looked at some of the most popular books, and I learned that from Think Like a Tree. Look at what works, look at
Yeah.
other things that work. So I looked at the Gruffalo and these types of books that seem to really connect with children. And I thought, okay, these colors, these styles, and I found my own style from that. And yeah, it took time to learn how to do that and get it done. And it was a pain in the neck, I have to say. Like, part of me was like, why do I have to do the drawings? And partly at one point I wanted to give up, but my dad was like, you have to do the drawings. You know, and that's another part of helping people grow their own way, helping them understand who they are. Is like, Abby, you're meant to do the drawings. Even if you think someone's going to do them better, you need to do your own drawings. And I did them. And now I'm very, very glad I did. It's been a fantastic process learning something new. And I am a little bit concerned with artificial intelligence, right? Because, like everyone is, because artificial kind of intelligence blew up maybe like a month after I started the journey of drawing. So if it had come earlier, I don't know if I would have done the drawings. I'd have been great. I can get some machine to do this for nothing. So I would encourage people that even though we do have these tools now, to just really draw. I think we're all meant to draw, we're all meant to write, we're all meant to sing, we're all meant to dance. I think it's healthy.
I think there's so many lessons, even in that process that you're sharing here about the authentic voice as well. Of course, we can do so many things, but sometimes the challenge and actually feeling the difficulty in any process makes it real. And then that sense of pride and satisfaction and gratitude that can come from that, maybe there is fantastic opportunities out there with AI, and I've no doubt about that. And also concerns for, caution and heedfulness. But what you're describing, even in that the process of writing the book and then putting it up for feedback and getting that chance to connect and bringing other voices in, like your father again, that encouragement to say, you know what, I'm going to go with this. And it's fantastic. I mean, when you see the illustrations, and people will hopefully get a chance to see that in both the audio version that you have up already, and then hopefully the physical side of physical touching, the tactile connection with something that's often missing as well in our digitalized world. But congratulations, Felicia, that is for pursuing that and seeing where it goes. But yeah, it is interesting, the whole other conversation around AI. I know that Elena, it's funny because our two daughters, they're often just wanted to perform at home. Like we're going to do a show in the next 10 seconds, and it can go anywhere and anytime. And it's a lot of fun and it's crazy. But often they ask, Mommy and Daddy, will you do the show or will you get involved? And it depends on our energy. Some days you interact, you engage, and hopefully you can let the formality of everything else that's going on in the world just get in and play and be playful. But it was a story that connected with the theme of your book as well, because Elena has performed once publicly in her life, and she was a tree, and so she makes people make fun of her in the family when you get to the discourse around Christmas time. Oh, you're going to be your tree again, because she did her one performance, and that was her being a tree swaying in the wind. And so when this book came out, I'm sure there's a connection with that as well. And there's something also you said about the rhyming, the song of the story and how that can capture people. And there's a few beautiful lines for me that will resonate. But I also imagine that people can read this book as parents and just go with what's happening in their own parenting journey. Kids coming out with whatever they want to be, whatever they want to say. There's so many layers, I think, to this book, and maybe some intended and some unintended, but there's a lot of beauty of coming out from that. And again, the terminology of flourishing and thriving, using the tree and nature for that, it's quite beautiful. But there was one line that jumped out at me. It's sort of a flow of a line, but she knew it was her job to make sure they would thrive. And then she says, she ignored all the teasing and grew quiet and strong, swayed in peace to her forest song. She swayed in peace to her forest song. And it was just the imagery that was in front of me in the page, but also the imagery going on as well of all of the challenges that young people face today. And, I'm very lucky that I grew up, and maybe you were the same, Abigail, in a world that was very different in school to with all the technology. I didn't have a mobile phone till I was sort of early in my college years even, and certainly a smartphone. And so there's so much going on, so much ways that we can be taunted and teased, but there's a resilience, there's a strength in this tree, and both imagery and words and the rhyming scheme were really jumping off the page, and listening. You were doing the audio yourself as well, so not only did you write it, did you illustrate it, but you also did the audio for this book. So much in that. Would you mind sharing a piece or some of the book, if that's okay, or
Yeah,
of course we can put the link up.
sure. I think I might read, yeah, I'll just read a few pages.
Brilliant.
So, and if anyone else is interested, they can just have a look at the YouTube video. Okay, I'll just jump right in.
Thank you.
The girl who became a tree. When you grow up, the teacher said, what are you going to be? The girl lifted her head, thought softly, and said, I'm going to be a tree, a ballerina, a baker, a super slime maker, a watcher of TV, a paint splatterer, a cat patterer, a football referee. But none of the other kids, you see, said anything as brilliant as a tree. Walking home, she told the pines in the park. She put her cheek against their bark. It was a secret, I know, but you see how I grow. They were going to know sooner or later. I'm one of you, no less, no greater. That night, as she soaked in the tub, her heart skipped a beat as she started to scrub. Wild green shoots between her toes. Where did they come from? Nobody knows. She dried off and jumped into bed. It's beginning to happen. I knew it would, she said.
Beautiful. Yeah, there's definitely got that flow, and there are many other really powerful kids books that again our kids will gravitate towards. And the Julie Donaldson, she seems to have nailed that with the Gruffalo and that lovely natural flow as well. But when you can plug in deep messages and learning and wisdom into that, as well as the imagery and the fun element, it makes for a really powerful connection with our kids. And again, I say this as a parent and somebody who's still learning to become a parent, and we're about to have our third child pretty soon. You know, every time you look at a book or hear a story or hear a piece of wisdom, trying to put it into life is the challenge. Knowing that it works, knowing that it resonates is fantastic, but putting it into action as soon as we can, and allowing that space for mistakes, allowing that humility and humanity as well. I think in relation to that, there's another line, Abigail, that came out from, because it sounds quite strong, and it sounds like a very automatic, natural reaction. If a child says, I want to do this, I want to be this, and then is it about the child then, or is it about the parent? Is it about the adults, responding to that? And so when you say, what kind of mother plants her child in the dirt, it's quite a strong question and imagery. What kind of mother plants her child in the dirt, and all the connotations that could have. But the response is so simple, elegant, and powerful, is that one that doesn't cut, one that doesn't hurt. Whoa, I was listening to that and thinking, okay, there's a heart connection here as well, but there's also a rational. I can see and hear my voice saying, well, I can't do that, or you can't do that, because what kind of parent, what will other people think of me? And I love the story you shared with your father as well, of the other way around. You in high school, I'm going to wear this. It does go both ways as well, but there's lovely, soft, invitational wisdom in there. Not necessarily advice, but how does that feel for you? How does it sound?
It's hard. Like I know as parents, we are meant to guide our children. We have to say no to certain things. Of course, that's the setup. That's the kind of hierarchy, and it's there for a reason, and it's good. I just think so. I'm not here going, just lose all control. And no, not at all. I just think it's like, just think about that. Do you know what I mean? I think that we live in a world nowadays where it's like you have to be all this or all that. And it's like, no, why don't we just consider and have a thought and just take a moment before we say no to the child? because sometimes it can become an automatic response. No, 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 not really thinking about why we're saying no or what we're doing. So I think that's why it came out. To be honest, Shane, I was really, when I've heard writers say, "Oh, I was just in the moment and it flowed out of me," that's the truth. It was just this kind of mystical experience, and it just flowed out. And I went, "Oh, wow, that's a nice story." Who wrote that? It felt a bit like that. It wasn't like me going, "I want to write a story and put this lesson about," and absolutely not. It was just someone, because it's interesting with this story. People have asked, a woman from Kenya read this, and she goes, "Oh, I really like this story. There's these undertones of racism." I went, "Wow, okay, I didn't know that." But then I go, "Okay, now I can see that." Someone goes, "Is this a book about a girl learning to accept her body as she goes through puberty?" I went, "Oh, maybe. I didn't know." "Is this about parents learning to listen to their children?" And I was like, "Well, to be honest, it's about a girl that turns into a tree." It's about a girl that
Yeah.
turns into a tree. But yes, there's all these messages in there. And I like this book. I have to say, I do like this book because that's how I like to be taught lessons. That's how I like to learn, in where I feel like I'm discovering or not sure. Is that what they're saying? It's not black and white. And I think sometimes with some of the lessons we try to teach kids in kids' book, it's like, I have one book and it's really like about being kind. And I picked it up because I went, yes, I want my child to be kind. But it doesn't stay in your bones the same way like a mythical story does. And I don't think it gets into your psyche, your subconscious. And that's what needs to happen. And so that's why I like myths. That's why I like symbolism. Because if someone says, be nice to your friends, it doesn't stay in my brain. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it doesn't.
No, it's so poignant actually what you're saying here, and I love the fact that many parents and many different people are going to be taking different things, transitions for children at any level, whether it's handing your child over into the kindergarten to school, primary school, secondary, university. There's always those. You put your child in the forest ahead, and you create as much as you can of the environment around, and you want to have that connection. But yeah, in terms of the simplicity of the message and putting it out there, for example, golden rule, and we've talked a little, you sort of were interpreting golden rule, if that it is simple, and yet that those words, as the ancient golden rule in all of the different religions that exist around the world, they have this one bond of the golden rule: do to all others. But as a child, as a 3-year-old child, like our youngest, or a 6-year-old, do those words resonate? And so we've taken on the project of, when a golden rulism, and golden rulism can, with the children, the animals, and nature, trying to embody that lesson of kindness, that, the connection with kindness, but in a different way. And in terms of, rather than getting in too technical, in terms of what we're trying to share, it's these lines here, do for all others directly and indirectly what you would want done for you. We get it, we understand it. It's simplistic, it's elegant. Or don't do to any others, directly or indirectly, what you wouldn't done to you. So they're simple lines, and they're sort of an adaptation of the golden rule. But understanding that from a child's perspective, the tree, or whatever else it might
Yeah.
be, that's the imagery. That's what we can connect with. And empathy, our innate compassion, that's there from when we're born. They're just trying to facilitate that. And again, there's the adult words, and I'd love to have you on again and have a conversation around your other book, because it resonates very much to the topics and the themes that we're looking to explore. But there's something beautiful about the children, the animals, the nature, and in our nature. It is in our nature to be kind, but we learn other things like the empathy, and when we're at a stage in our life that we can take on empathy and actually understand it to be a detachment of my feelings, my emotions to somebody else's, when the time is right as well. So
I think the project is fantastic. And I love the goal. I love the idea of the golden rule, because with all mythology, with all storytelling, it's the basis of all the different faiths. It's the basis of all the different, when you distill it down, that's what it is. And Joseph Campbell, I don't know if you know of
yes,
him,
yeah,
but
the hero's journey, it's
yeah,
amazing.
the hero's journey, it's
Simple.
that. So I think it's fantastic to have this organization that's focusing on that, because that's what we should be focusing on. The thing that brings us all together, rather than the other things that are quite small, really, in the grand scheme of things.
I love that. And I love the fact that you're bringing in sort of the monomyth. And, that is if you look at any movie that really connects with kids, it always has those same components. And from listening to your story of this book as well, the trials and tribulations, you go through the dark tunnel sometimes to come out, and you have the mentors there. There's something beautiful in that. And that's what we're trying to capture ultimately, I think collectively, to be able to put it out there in different platters for people to take on board. So last question, and I think you've already answered it, to be honest with you. So if you have, that's fine, and we can sort of come to a natural close here. But I definitely want to talk about your other book at some stage. Two questions really. Where and how and when can people get hold of this book is the first one. And then what would your ultimate aspirations be from this point? Where it could go from here? Probably like a tree.
So in terms of getting the book, it's available on Amazon at the moment, just at Amazon at the moment. My hope is to get it other places, but it's sort of all the different, .com or .es and all of the different ones. So what do you mean exactly? What is my hope for the book or the story? What do you think?
Yes,
What is my
I'll try and clarify, because I'm sorry. Sometimes we have an expectation. I don't get the impression already from chatting here that you have these unrealistic expectations. But if we shift from expectations to an aspiration, it puts less pressure on the outcome. So when you were going through that, and maybe after completing it, what would your ultimate, because goal sounds very serious, but an aspiration for what could happen?
I would just love it to spread, like to grow like a tree. I really would, because I do think it's a good story, and I think it has a lot of messages, and I think there's messages that I'd even like, or things I don't even see. Like last week, I did my children's class on Friday afternoons. I teach children, and I was reading the book, and one little girl goes, "Teacher, I think I'm turning into a tree because I've got these green veins." And so I was just like, what? I didn't even think about that. So I would just love to see it grow naturally. Just people talk like the old school way, just people saying, you know what, I really like this story. You should read it. Or, yeah, I don't know. I would just love it to grow if people like it. That's what it is. If people want to share the story, I hope to see it spread around everywhere, and that people start to make that, and through the story, people start to make those connections about how we really are nature, and maybe we can think about learning from our children as well as us teaching them these types of things. That's what I hope for the book.
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for sharing. Thanks for sharing everything, but particularly that that aspiration of where it can go, and I think should go. And if everybody can get out there and get a chance to see this and experience it and then share it, I think by word of mouth, often of course we've got Amazon and we've got advertising, but word of mouth for these type of things can really make a big difference. For me, there's great indigenous wisdom in this book, in these images, in this story, and particularly with the cycles, the season cycles as well. We've so much out there to learn, and I'm only starting as an adult to go back and reconnect with what is indigeneity as a concept, as a theme. It's not a verb, but it's something doing and relating to your action, and maybe relating to your other book as well. But we're all indigenous to somewhere, and of course that can sound controversial because it's been taken up in many different ways. But for me, there's just a natural, beautiful connection to what it is to be indigenous, and to have that somewhere in our brain, but also to connect with indigeneity as a thing we do and see, and how we can connect with the world around us. So in Irish, we'd say Gurev Mila Mahigod. 1,000 thank yous to you, Abigail. And I really look forward to having another conversation. Yeah, well,
how do you say it again? Because I would love to know how to say it.
Well, and I'll share it with you, but Gurev Mila Mahigod. 1,000 thank yous to you or upon you, because it's